There's a number that has quietly shaped Japan's entire car industry for over 70 years. And it isn't 25. And it isn't 1955. It's 660, as in 660 cubic centimeters, smaller than some motorcycle engines. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how this one number came to control nearly 40% of everything sold in Japan today, why it kept shrinking and growing over the decades, and why some people think the whole system is quietly heading toward extinction. To understand why this number exists at all, you have to go back to 1949, 4 years after the end of World War II. Japan's economy was in ruins. Most families couldn't afford a full-size car, couldn't afford the fuel, and in many cities, didn't even have roads or parking built for one. The Japanese government needed a way to get the country moving again, literally without waiting for the economy to fully recover first. Their solution was to create an entirely new legal category of vehicle, something small enough to be cheap to build, cheap to fuel, and easy to license, but still counted as a real car. They called it keijidosha, literally light automobile. The original limit in 1949 was tiny, just 150cc, barely bigger than a scooter engine, with strict size restrictions on length and width. Here's where the story gets interesting, because that 150cc limit didn't last. Over the following decades, the government adjusted the K-car, rules again and again, and each change tells you something about what Japan needed at that moment in its history. In 1950, just 1 year in, the limit was already raised to 300cc, then 360cc by 1955 as the economy started to recover, and cars needed just a bit more power to be practical. This 360cc era is actually one of the most important in K-car history. This is when companies like Subaru released the Subaru 360, and Honda, Suzuki, and Daihatsu all built their early reputations. For an entire generation of Japanese families, a 360cc kei car was their very first car ever, full stop. Then, in 1976, the limit jumped again to 550cc as safety standards started catching up with the rest of the auto industry, and kei cars needed slightly bigger engines to meet them. And finally, in 1990, the limit reached where it sits today, 660cc, alongside updated size limits for length and width that are still in effect right now. So why has 660cc lasted over 3 decades without changing, when every previous limit only lasted 10 to 20 years? This is the part that surprises a lot of people outside Japan. It's not really about the engine size itself anymore. It's about everything built around that number. Once a vehicle qualifies as a kei car, it unlocks a whole separate system. Lower annual road tax, lower vehicle weight tax, often lower insurance premiums, and this is a big one for city dwellers in many areas. Kei car owners don't need to prove they have off-street parking to register the vehicle, something required for regular cars in dense urban areas. Kei cars are even registered through a completely different authority than regular cars. The Kei Car Inspection Association, not the local transport bureau that handles standard vehicles. All of these benefits are tied directly to that 660cc line. Raise the limit, and you'd have to redesign an entire tax and regulatory structure that millions of people and multiple car manufacturers have built their businesses around. That's the real reason 660cc has survived since 1990. Not because the engineering couldn't go further, but because too much of the country's transportation economy depends on the number staying exactly where it is. The small size doesn't just save money on taxes. It saves money every time the car needs maintenance, too. Take tires as one example because kei cars are so much smaller and lighter than a regular sedan or an SUV. They use much smaller tires, and those tires cost noticeably less to replace. The same logic applies across a lot of routine maintenance. Smaller parts, lighter components, generally lower costs than an equivalent repair on a full-size vehicle. And despite the tiny engine, kei cars aren't held to some lesser durability standard. I can speak to this directly, since I also run a rental car business in Japan alongside my used car work. At my company, we set 150,000 kilometers as the retirement threshold for our regular-sized rental cars. And here's the thing, we set that exact same 150,000 kilometer threshold for our kei cars too. Same number, same standard, no separate category for the small ones. Now, if you're watching this from the US or Europe, 150,000 kilometers might actually sound short. That's roughly 93,000 miles, and plenty of cars overseas run well past double that before anyone considers them done. But in Japan, this number reflects the local system as much as the car itself. Strict biennial Shaken inspections get more expensive as a car ages, and the culture here leans toward retiring a vehicle earlier, rather than pushing it to its absolute mechanical limit. It's less about what the car can physically handle and more about what makes financial sense within Japan's own inspection and ownership system. Point being, whatever mileage standard a regular car is held to here, K cars are held to it too. And the manufacturers have leaned into this hard. Suzuki, Daihatsu, and Honda in particular built enormous portions of their domestic business on key cars at times. K models have made up more than a third of some manufacturers' entire Japanese sales. Companies didn't just tolerate the 66 key limit, they engineered around it, aggressively packing in turbochargers, all-wheel drive, and increasingly sophisticated safety features, all inside a vehicle legally capped at the engine size of a mid-size motorcycle. Today, key cars still make up nearly 40% of new vehicle sales in Japan. That's not a niche market, that's a massive chunk of an entire country's auto industry, built on top of a wartime recovery era. Regulation that's now 3/4 of a century old. But here's the part that brings us back to why this matters. Right now in the present, there's a real, ongoing conversation in Japan about whether the key car system can survive the next decade. Electric vehicles are part of the pressure. Batteries add weight and cost that squeeze against the key cars tight. Size and price constraints in ways a gasoline engine never did. Manufacturers are also facing rising costs to meet. Ever stricter safety regulations, all while trying to keep key car prices low enough to justify the category's existence in the first place. Some industry voices have openly questioned whether key cars, as we know them, will still exist in their current form 20 years from now. For now, though, the system remains exactly what it's been since 1990, a tightly bounded set of rules that somehow manages to keep evolving cars, without ever changing the one number that started it all. If you're looking to import a Japanese vehicle, understanding this history isn't just trivia. It explains why key cars are priced the way they are, why the U.S. import market for them exists at all, and why they're often such incredible value once they cross that 25-year import threshold we've covered in earlier videos. In the next video, we're switching gears entirely, literally to look at the yellow license plate. Every key car carries and clear up a misconception a lot of people have about what that color actually means.